According to government data, nearly 50 million Americans lack consistent access to food. Many depend on the charity of food banks.
For decades, millions of Americans believed that the United States would never face a food shortage. The endless fields of Iowa were an unspoken promise Americans would always have enough to eat. But that promise is rotting in storage. Since May, countless farmers have stopped planting, not because they're lazy, but because they know that sowing seeds now means sowing debt. Selling prices have been cut in half, fertilizer costs have doubled, and export contracts have gone to neighboring countries. Those who once fed the world can no longer feed their own families. And when farmers stop growing, who will be the first to go hungry? Watch the video U.S. farmers have stopped producing. These 10 states will starve. First, to find out whether this wave could affect your meals tomorrow. Please note that this information is compiled from statistical data and is not intended to discredit any organization or individual. Number 1. Nevada. When American farmers stop sowing seeds, the first state to feel hunger isn't one with failed harvests, but one that never had any crops to lose. Nevada. From above, Las Vegas still shines brightly. LED lights still blink along the strip. Tourists still crowd in front of casinos, and every signboard glows as if no crisis has ever touched this city. But just step behind a major supermarket in the eastern part of the city, where trucks used to line up, and you'll see a very different picture. Empty loading bays, halted conveyor belts, and warehouse doors shut. Not because shifts ended, but because there's nothing left to unload. Nevada isn't hungry due to failed crops. The state barely produces anything agriculturally. With its arid desert climate, depleted soil, and increasingly scarce water resources, most of Nevada's food, from eggs, milk, and vegetables to meat, has always been imported. In times of abundance, that wasn't a problem. California, Arizona, Utah, neighboring states, served as a strong agricultural backbone. But when the supply chain collapses at its root, Nevada takes the first hit. Since May this year, numerous farms in California have ceased operations due to labor shortages and skyrocketing operating costs. The growing season shortened yields, plummeted, and prices could no longer cover expenses. The trucks that once regularly rolled into Las Vegas are now absent. According to internal estimates from a major supermarket chain in the region, the volume of fresh vegetables imported fell by more than 40% in just the first 2 weeks of June. Eggs dropped over 50%. The shortage spread throughout the city, warehouses ran dry, and supermarkets no longer received full shipments. On the electronic board of a major retail store, the produce promotion section was erased from the list. Shoppers no longer chose between organic and non-organic, but whether there was anything left at all. In a place once seen as a paradise of consumption, every meal began to feel like a gamble. Nevada has no crops, but lived off the crops of others. When fields elsewhere lay abandoned, dependent systems like the state began to collapse. No production, no storage, no backup plan. And then one day, what was once taken for granted, a single egg, a bunch of greens, suddenly became a luxury. Here's a little-known fact: beneath Las Vegas in flood control tunnels, thousands of homeless people live. No address, no electricity, no clean water. They survive off what the city discards. But now when even those above ground begin to starve, the darkness below grows even more silent. Neon lights can't drive away hunger on any level. Nevada won't be the last state to fall into crisis, but it shows the starkest truth: when you sow nothing, you reap nothing. And when the entire U.S. agricultural system begins to stall, the place is built on consumption. Not production will be the first to feel the chill of shortage. Number 2. Rhode Island. Rhode Island has never been a self-sufficient state. As the smallest state in the U.S., with a dense population, humid climate, and limited farmland, it has long relied on the steady flow of goods from neighboring states: New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. Food, greens, milk, eggs, all delivered daily by interstate trucks. And when those trucks stop, hunger doesn't need to knock, it walks in through the back door of logistics. Since early June, numerous farms in supplying states have paused planting due to soaring input costs, a shortage of seasonal labor, and unsellable inventory. The impact spread rapidly to places like Rhode Island, places that live by consumption but cannot produce. According to updates from the state's Department of Education, many schools have been forced to adjust menus, remove meat, reduce vegetables, and shorten the number of days offering free lunch. With more than 1/3 of children in the state from low-income families, this is not just a technical adjustment. It is a direct blow to the most important meal of the day for thousands of children. The shortage also infiltrated daily life. Major supermarket chains like Walmart Market Basket and Stop & Shop in Rhode Island reported rising scarcity of essential goods according to data from the Northeast Retail Association. Inventory of leafy greens dropped over 36% in June, while items like milk, eggs, and chicken saw average shortages of 28% and 32% depending on the area. In counties like Woonsocket and Central Falls, where poverty rates exceed the state average, residents began coordinating grocery trips, lining up before opening hours to grab what little was left. The median household income in Rhode Island is around $74,000 per year, not low, but not among the nation's wealthiest either. However, with food prices up more than 12% year over year, and some organic products rising 35–40%, that income no longer guarantees food security for many families. Those who used to just scrape by now must choose between paying the electric bill or buying fresh meat. Community support systems like SNAP food stamps or free meal programs are also becoming overwhelmed, not from lack of funds, but from having nothing left to distribute. Schools aren't the only ones silently bearing the brunt. Nursing homes across the state from Newport to Pawtucket began adopting short-cycle rotating menus, a euphemism for portion cuts and reduced nutritional content. For many elderly individuals dependent on subsidies and institutional care, the lack of greens or milk is no longer an inconvenience. It's a risk of physical decline. Meanwhile, charitable food distribution groups found themselves cornered. Warehouses that were already small now sat empty as shipments from Pennsylvania were postponed indefinitely. More people came to ask for help every day, but those handing out food had nothing left to give. Rhode Island is a beautiful, peaceful state, often ranked high in quality of life. But that peaceful exterior can't hide one fact: when your economy is built around consumption imports and services, even a small disruption in the supply chain can unravel the fabric of daily life. Number 3. Iowa. Fire doesn't only come from drought, it also comes from despair. In mid-May, on a soybean field near Clinton County, Iowa, thin smoke rose from rows of unharvested plants. Some farmers chose to burn the remains of their crop rather than keep them. They just didn't want to spend more money storing something with no buyer, no route, no reason to wait. Iowa was once a symbol of American agriculture. But in the first half of 2025, that chain began to break. Several major export contracts were suddenly suspended, and processing plants in the state were forced to operate at minimal capacity. Crop prices plunged while input costs from fertilizer to fuel kept rising. Financial aid for small growers was delayed or discontinued, leaving many unable to fund the next planting season. Simultaneously, seasonal labor shortages worsened. With every link slackening, farmers quietly withdrew. By early June, according to estimates from the Midwest Agricultural Association, nearly 40% of Iowa's soybean acreage remained unplanted, the lowest in over 30 years. Multi-generational farms began listing for sale. Many were sold to foreign investment funds, entities that saw opportunity where locals saw only loss. The reversal wasn't just on the land, it showed up in the meals of Iowans themselves. Supermarkets across the state reported shortages in essential goods. Greens, eggs, fresh meat were all in decline, especially in rural areas. Egg prices rose more than 50% in just over a month, while some organic products practically disappeared from shelves. In certain places, residents lined up for food aid, something they'd never imagined, especially in a region once believed to feed the entire country. But reality has changed. Because when no one plants, no one harvests. And when the supply chain breaks at its root, even those who once had plenty can't escape the emptiness at the dinner table. As Iowa stagnates, other nations move forward. Some of America's major former export markets have now turned to suppliers in Canada, South America, and Eastern Europe. Contracts that once flowed through the Midwest are being rerouted, not because of lower quality, but because other places are now producing faster. And Iowa, once the first choice, now stands outside the game it once led. The younger generation sees this most clearly. In rural areas, the children of farmers are turning to new careers: delivery drivers, technicians, long-haul truckers. Not because they don't love the land, but because they've seen their parents work non-stop, only to quietly absorb losses after every sudden shock. For them, farming is no longer a way of life. It's a burden too heavy to bear. Number 4. New Jersey. In the middle of summer on the crowded Jersey Shore beaches, some restaurants have had to shut down their kitchens by 4 p.m. Not because of a lack of customers, but because they had nothing left to serve. New Jersey used to be an ideal weekend getaway for millions of people from the northeastern U.S., a place of salty seas, cool breezes, and always fresh dinners. But the summer of 2025 is exposing a paradox. While tourists still pour in, restaurant menus are thinning by the day. Dishes that were once iconic grilled clams, kale salad, fresh beef burgers are being replaced by cold sandwiches, canned pasta, or worse, blank sheets of paper taped over the menu with a simple line, "temporarily unavailable." This is not due to a small system error. It's the result of an economic structure pushed beyond its limits. New Jersey has lost its ability to supply its own food. For over 2 decades, farmland has given way to housing parking lots and shopping centers. Agriculture's share of the state's GDP has dropped to a very low level, and most daily food here now comes from Pennsylvania, Delaware. Maryland states that are simultaneously facing production crises due to surging input costs, labor shortages, and stalled export demand. At major container ports like Newark, the situation isn't any better. Imported food shipments are delayed and insufficient to make up for domestic shortages. Suburban supermarket chains report that vegetable and egg supplies to their warehouses dropped nearly 40% in June. Many stores have changed policies from buy as much as you like to limit one per customer. Shoppers who used to buy out of habit are now learning to buy based on what's left. The clearest snapshot plays out in family-run restaurants. A seaside eatery in Atlantic Highlands that once served over 200 guests per night had to cancel dozens of reservations this month because it couldn't find vegetables and meat of adequate quality. Fresh dishes disappeared. Hot dishes began to run out, and when restaurants stop operating those who depend on them, chefs, waitstaff, delivery drivers quietly leave their jobs. This is not a crisis of poverty, but of dependency. Many people in New Jersey still have stable incomes ready to pay for a quality meal, but money can't buy what no longer exists in the supply chain. And when the urban middle class, the group that once believed hunger was a distant problem, starts to feel the emptiness at the dinner table, their faith in stability begins to waver. Number 5. Nebraska. If in New Jersey consumers have money but no options, in Nebraska producers have cattle grain storage but no place to send them. Every link in the supply chain is quietly collapsing, and this time even the people who feed America are beginning to face hunger. Nebraska isn't lacking in output. It's one of the top soybean and corn producing states and a national hub for commercial cattle farming. But when export flows are blocked not due to natural disasters but due to subtle shifts in global trade, the entire system stalls. Storage facilities in central regions like Dawson and Buffalo are packed with unsold grain. Some ranchers have had to rent temporary storage in other states. Others have chosen to destroy excesses, raising more leads to deeper losses. One farm had to liquidate up to 40% of its herd just to cut feed losses. Some batches of livestock were sent to slaughter earlier than scheduled, not for technical reasons, but because there was no cash flow left to keep them fed. The issue isn't grasswater or skill. It's that output markets' export contracts to Asia, South America, or Europe have gradually shifted to faster, cheaper, more stable competitors. Since the start of the year, Brazil has reclaimed numerous meat and soybean contracts once held by U.S. firms. Meanwhile, certain expected trade incentives have yet to materialize, causing many international partners to pause or cancel orders. As the export chain grinds to a halt, domestic processing plants are also scaling back. No buyers, no transportation, no handling. Nebraska is trapped between surplus production and a distribution system that no longer functions as before. Ironically, people in Nebraska at the heart of agriculture are now beginning to lack properly processed fresh food. Some small towns have reported supermarkets short on quality meat even while surrounded by livestock. Meat may be available, but it hasn't gone through the necessary processing steps to reach consumers on time. It's something few had imagined: you can live in the middle of farmland yet eat frozen goods shipped in from elsewhere. Nebraska also faces a softer but more alarming challenge: the retreat of the next generation. When no one signs contracts before planting season banks, stop lending to small farms. Young people leave the family ranch to become drivers, technicians, or logistics workers in other states. No one wants to stick with a job where prices are decided elsewhere and income depends on global geopolitical shifts. Nebraska still has land people and technology. But when the whole system is built around a market that's now turned its back, producers will gradually be pushed to the margins, not for lacking skill, but for lacking a place in the game. And when those who feed America begin to go hungry, the places that rely on food shipped in from the mainland could be the next to spiral out of control. Number 6. Massachusetts. Every day, tens of thousands of trucks enter Massachusetts, but on a June afternoon, just a few convoys failing to depart on time from the south was enough to put the entire state on the back foot. The delay didn't cause traffic jams, nor did it disrupt stock trades. It left plates empty for thousands of people in places no one expected: hospitals, nursing homes, schools. A major hospital on the outskirts of Boston served lunch 45 minutes late because its order of fresh vegetables and milk from Georgia didn't arrive in time. Not because of natural disaster, but because the truck never left the warehouse: a shortage of drivers, high fuel prices, and carriers, cutting routes due to unprofitable margins. Within the next 48 hours, the menu switched entirely to canned goods and pasta. No one spoke up, but no one denied it either. Massachusetts is being placed in a scenario it was never mentally prepared for. This is the state of Harvard, MIT biotech hubs, world-leading hospitals, but it doesn't produce food and can't store it either. For years, Massachusetts embraced a lean economic structure. Land was for education, tech services, food would be imported from elsewhere. The just-in-time logistics model made everything seem smooth until it stumbled. And the stumble of 2025 is no minor one. Southern states like Georgia, Tennessee, and the Carolinas, key suppliers of vegetables, eggs, and milk for the Northeast, are grappling with production crises, rising transport costs, and broken supply chains. According to preliminary data from a New England Food Distribution Association, shipping costs from Atlanta to Boston have risen more than 40% since the start of the year. Importers are forced to reduce orders, delay shipments, or drop perishable items entirely. This directly impacts healthcare systems, schools, and nursing homes, places once considered the safest. Some public schools in Lowell had to change lunch menus for students up to 4 times in 1 week, not due to lack of funding, but because there weren't enough fresh greens to prepare meals. A supermarket in Springfield closed earlier than usual. Egg shelves were empty by 3 p.m. Milk prices fluctuated daily, forcing consumers, even those not in hardship, to reconsider every purchase. Massachusetts doesn't lack seaports. The Port of Boston still runs steadily, but most containers arriving there carry industrial goods, medical equipment, or pharmaceuticals. Fresh food, a category that demands speed, temperature control, and perfect timing, still relies on long-haul trucks from southern states. And when that flow stalls, Massachusetts is left with virtually no plan B. The smart city model where everything is connected through data and tech is now blocked by one simple fact: goods didn't arrive. What makes the situation severe is not the temporary shortage, but the long-term dependency. This is not a glitch. It's a mirror reflecting that even an elite, advanced, degree-filled society can be temporarily upended simply by not receiving a truckload of vegetables. Boston's middle and upper class, once used to endless options, are now lining up to buy canned goods. Not because they want to, but because it's the only thing left. Number 7, Kansas. It is astonishing that in a state once known as the breadbasket of America, where wheat blankets the horizon and the land stretches endlessly, people are now witnessing a shortage of fresh food in their own supermarkets. Bread prices rise by the week. Eggs and milk must be imported from other states. Some small towns have begun tightening the distribution of fresh produce due to delayed shipments, not because of crop failure, but because there's no longer a reason to harvest. The harvest season arrived early this year in Kansas, but the joy came late. Or didn't come at all. On the western fields, the wheat had already turned golden by early June, yet the harvesters lay still. Many landowners chose to let the wheat wither under the sun. Harvesting costs money for labor. Selling doesn't cover the cost of fuel. This is no longer an isolated story, but a trend quietly spreading across the Midwest. Kansas produces nearly 1/5 of the nation's wheat, but the modern distribution system does not prioritize domestic goods. Wheat prices are regulated by the global market, where Ukraine, Russia, and Canada currently hold an advantage thanks to lower costs and government subsidies. Meanwhile, Kansas farmers are burdened by record-high input costs from fertilizers to fuel. Each acre now costs more than $160 to farm, yet wheat prices are lower than they were 5 years ago. A gap that cannot be closed by yield alone. Price pressure isn't even the worst part. The true challenge lies in credit. The banking system in Central America has started tightening agricultural loans after 3 consecutive seasons of late payments. According to internal reports, over 20% of wheat farms in the state are now classified as high risk and ineligible for loan extensions. In towns like Salina or Dodge City machinery auctions, once exchanges among farmers, are now closely watched by financial corporations looking to acquire foreclosed assets. What's more bitter is the sense of unmet expectation. After months of waiting for the G7 summits to deliver breakthroughs for U.S. agricultural exports, such as tax incentives, purchase commitments, or market access, Kansas residents have received nothing but diplomatic statements. Agreements haven't materialized, and the crops can't wait. In a global trade system driven by speed, even with production in hand, American farmers are left behind without a market fast enough to consume it. Number 8. Hawaii. Can you believe it? In one of the most expensive and luxurious destinations in the U.S., where a single night's stay can cost thousands of dollars, it's leafy greens that are the first to vanish from the menu. Some resorts in Oahu now offer only 3 rotating options for dinner, frozen chicken spaghetti, and packaged salad. Tropical fruits, once iconic, have been replaced by canned goods or industrial juice. For tourists, it's an inconvenience. For locals, it's a silent warning even paradise can go hungry. Hawaii has long been almost entirely dependent on supplies from the mainland. Nearly 90% of its food is imported primarily by ship and air from California. This isn't news. But in June 2025, with jet fuel prices soaring, a prolonged pilot shortage, and container shipping costs climbing, the already fragile logistic structure of these islands began to fracture. Some air cargo routes were cut. California ports reported labor shortages for unloading, causing food containers bound for Hawaii to be delayed by days. The cold chain in which requires absolute precision began to break. As a result, supermarkets in Honolulu, Maui, and even the Big Island have started to show empty shelves. Vegetable prices have risen over 30% on average. Eggs and milk have become luxury items not because of price, but because they're simply unavailable. Some convenience stores have shifted entirely to frozen goods. Small eateries are being forced to shut down due to lack of ingredients. But more alarming is that food scarcity in Hawaii doesn't just affect daily life, it's threatening the tourism industry. The state's #1 economic pillar. Several resorts in Kauai and Lanai have had to cancel major buffet events due to their inability to secure fresh ingredients. Tourists complain on social media leave low ratings and demand compensation. The images once associated with a tropical paradise. Pineapple cocktails, grilled tuna, green papaya salad, are becoming memories. To visitors, it may be a disappointing experience. But to local businesses, it's a risk of lost revenue, lost jobs, and the looming inability to maintain service standards in the near future. Hawaii has beaches, sunshine, and global renown. But when your meal depends entirely on a flight from the mainland, a single disruption can upend the entire system. In recent years, the state had proposed developing a self-sustaining local agriculture model. But progress has been slow. Arable land is scarce, and costs far exceed those of imports. When the world runs smoothly, that model once seemed impractical. But when the supply chain falters, Hawaii has no plan B. Ironically, it is precisely development and modernization that have stripped this place of its ability to feed itself. A resort paradise can build 5-star hotels, open golf courses atop volcanoes host beach weddings, but it cannot guarantee a fresh meal if a container is held up at the Port of Oakland. Number 9. Illinois. Most of the states on this list are facing problems at one end of the food chain. Either they can't grow their own crops due to harsh natural conditions, or farmers have given up because cultivation no longer pays. But Illinois is in a completely different position. Illinois is in the middle, a massive transit hub where goods from all over the United States are gathered, sorted, and redistributed. It's like a central station connecting everything together, and if that station slows down, then no matter what people grow or want to eat, it's hard for anything to reach them on time. In Joliet, the state's largest logistics cluster containers pile up in the yard, but the sorting lines operate at a crawl, not because there's no supply, but because there's a lack of workers, a lack of drivers, a lack of returning containers, and a lack of backup equipment when machines break down mid-shift. In the first 2 weeks of June, order processing efficiency at many centers dropped by up to 30% compared to the same period last year. A number significant enough to throw nationwide distribution schedules out of sync. When Illinois gets clogged, it's not just Chicago that feels it. In Tennessee, a shipment of produce from California got stuck for nearly half a day at a transfer center, arriving too late to serve in school kitchens. In Ohio, a small supermarket chain had to limit the number of eggs each customer could buy. Florida, more than 500 kilometers away, reported frozen meat deliveries arriving 3 days late, enough to disrupt the entire restocking schedule. The paradox is this: America isn't short on goods. Farms still produce, factories still pack, and people can still buy. But none of it matters unless it arrives in the right place at the right time under the right storage conditions. A logistics system that once ran like clockwork is now losing gears. Revealing its greatest weakness, we live by speed but have no room for error. Even within the state, Chicago residents are beginning to feel the effects. Some supermarkets are closing earlier than usual because they don't have enough stock. Eggs, fresh milk, and leafy vegetables, seemingly simple items, now appear sporadically plentiful one day and gone the next. Restaurants that once operated steadily are changing menus daily, not because of price hikes, but simply because they can't be sure if the delivery truck will arrive tomorrow. Illinois isn't starving, but other places could go hungry if this state gets stuck. And when the heart of the logistics network begins to falter the rest of the body, whether the consumer's hand or the policymaker's mind, cannot escape the chill that follows. Number 10. Oregon. The final name on this list may surprise many. Not because it's a poor arid state or one that depends entirely on imports, but because Oregon was once a symbol of hope. A place where people believed it was possible to eat clean, live healthy, and protect both land and people. But in June 2025, that belief is wearing thin. Not in words, but in every meal without enough clean vegetables, in every child developing allergies from poor quality substitutes, and in every farmer quietly abandoning their fields to become delivery drivers. No other state in the US is as closely tied to organic agriculture as Oregon. From Eugene to Ashland, from rural areas to model neighborhoods, the legacy of idealistic farming is everywhere. But now, according to preliminary reports from the state's Department of Agriculture, more than 19% of small-scale organic farms have ceased operations in just the second quarter alone, not due to crop failure, not due to lack of demand, but because they can no longer make a living from clean cultivation. Certification costs, reporting procedures, and strict requirements for soil, water, seeds have made it impossible for small farms to stay afloat. Meanwhile, food labeled organic from overseas is flooding supermarket chains at lower prices but with virtually no traceable origins. Oregon residents still want to eat clean, but clean now takes a roundabout route, crossing oceans, then lying quietly on shelves among rows of cheaper, faster, and flashier packaged options. The issue isn't just the market, it's the rupture between values and accessibility. As clean food grows scarcer, state health organizations are beginning to warn of nutritional imbalances among children whose diets rely heavily on frozen and canned foods. An internal survey in Portland recorded a slight rise in food allergy cases over the past 2 months, mainly due to the replacement of local ingredients with imported packaged goods. In nursing homes, fiber-rich and vegetable-heavy meals are now served only a few times a week, not because of budget cuts, but because there's nowhere left to buy from. And that is the final somber story that closes today's list. From the abandoned fields of Iowa to the empty supermarkets in Massachusetts, from the debt-ridden farmers of Kansas to the exodus from the organic dream in Oregon, this is the consequence when farmers no longer want to grow food for the nation. A country that once fed the world is now forced to ask if supply chains break down, if farmers give up, if states become increasingly dependent, who will ensure tomorrow's meals. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Please note that the analysis in this video is based on current data and an independent perspective. It is not intended to make absolute predictions about the future or to cause confusion. We hope this information will help the community reflect and take timely action.